Hello and welcome back to the Rock Record. Let's talk rocks.
Gold was discovered in the Yukon in 1896 by George Carmack and two First Nations companions, Skookum Jim and Dawson Charlie. The few flakes they found in Bonanza Creek in the Klondike barely filled the spent cartridge of a Winchester rifle. However, it was enough to trigger an incredible stampede for riches. Today, I'm retracing the steps of those desperate prospectors to uncover the true story of the Klondike Gold Rush.
All right, so when you think about Seattle, you probably don't think geology and mining.
I'm starting my journey here in Seattle, Washington. Today, it's known for coffee and tech giants, but in 1897, it was the gateway to unimaginable riches. On July 17, 1897, the steamship Portland docked here, carrying 68 prospectors and what newspapers called a ton of gold. The news spread like wildfire. The country, in the midst of a depression, went gold crazy. The Klondike Gold Rush was a long and dangerous journey. At each stage of the rush, more and more people turned back. There were many routes to the gold fields. The routes typically began in the west coast town like Seattle and headed north to the towns of Skagway and Dyea. Once in Alaska, the journey continued on foot over the mountains and hundreds of miles of the Yukon River. It took gold seekers around 9 months to reach their destination, the gold fields. Gold seekers who rushed to the Klondike were called stampeders. After realizing how unprepared many of these stampeders were, the Canadian government implemented the 1-ton law of 1898. This required all stampeders to carry a year's supply of food and equipment weighing close to 1 ton or 2,000 pounds. Though the heavy loads made the journey more difficult, it did help prevent starvation.
Instead of running north for the gold rush, merchants in Seattle found their riches elsewhere by supplying all of the stampeders heading north. It's estimated that 70% of the Klondike Gold Rush's 100,000 participants passed through Seattle on their way to the Klondike.
Would you have joined the gold rush, risking it all for possible riches, or stayed behind to become the merchant supplying the stampeders? Adventure versus security. Gold seeker versus shopkeeper. Which would you have chosen? Let me know in the comments.
Once stampeders left Seattle, that's when the real work began.
While I'm retracing the steps of the Klondike Gold Rush, my journey north is a bit more comfortable. I'm hopping on a beautiful cruise ship, a far cry from the packed steamers of 1897. Back then, tens of thousands of gold-crazed men and women steamed up the Inside Passage waterway, facing storms, icebergs, and overcrowded ships.
Hello and welcome to historic Skagway, Alaska. While our journey may have started in Seattle, right here is where the real adventure of the Gold Rush begins.
On July 27, 1897, just 10 days after the steamship Portland docked in Seattle, the first steamship landed in Skagway Bay. Pretty much overnight, this muddy little tent city exploded into the largest city in Alaska, with a population of 20,000. Back in the day, Skagway was a lawless frontier town, controlled by the notorious conman Soapy Smith.
Soapy's rule ended on the legendary shootout on Juneau Wharf. But for the stampeders, the real challenge lay ahead, the dreaded mountain passes.
From here, stampeders faced a crucial decision: tackle the 44-mile White Pass Trail out of Skagway, or the shorter but steeper 33-mile Chilkoot Trail out of nearby Dyea. Skagway means home of the north wind in the local Tlingit language. Gold seekers bound for the Klondike arrived in Skagway and its adjacent town of Dyea in 1898 and followed the centuries-old Tlingit Trail along the Dyea River over the Chilkoot Pass to reach the Canadian interior. The Chilkoot Trail was called the meanest 33 miles in history, and the final ascent climbed 1,000 feet in only an eighth of a mile. You've probably seen pictures out of here of the Golden Stairs, which were carved into the ice on a steep incline. The White Pass Trail was advertised as good for pack animals, although it was longer, but it eventually became called the Dead Horse Trail because an estimated 3,000 horses died. The White Pass Trail, opened by Captain William Moore, was designed for lightly loaded horses and experienced horsemen. It wasn't prepared for the hordes of inexperienced gold seekers. At times, the trail became impassable due to harsh weather, rain, and mud. Many stampeders retreated, leaving their outfits strewn along 40 miles of trail. It was a brutal journey for man and beast alike. However, the horrors of this trail sparked an incredible feat of engineering.
Today, I'm heading up what's left of the White Pass Trail. Admittedly, I'm taking a much easier route than the stampeders did back in the day.
Many people who came to Skagway recognized the ample opportunities that the gold rush provided. A growing population created opportunities for entrepreneurs to set up business in Skagway.
Much like 100 years ago, the streets of Skagway today are lined with merchants and visitors from all over the world. Unlike 100 years ago, much of the visitors here today come from the thriving tourism industry here that is deeply rooted in the history of the historic Klondike Gold Rush.
George Brackett was one such man. He was the former mayor of Minneapolis, Minnesota, who lost his fortune during the Panic of 1893. Convinced that the White Pass was the best route to the goldfields, George Brackett and his 7 sons started building a wagon road over the White Pass Trail. Brackett sank $185,000 of his own money into his wagon road and charged tolls along the way to rebuild his fortune. He used 400 pounds of dynamite and black blasting powder to clear the way for the road, and he charged the miners 75 cents per pound to cross. Brackett would promote the use of his wagon road at every opportunity and advertised it as the only practical wagon road in Alaska. As the fall of 1897 turned into the winter of 1898, stampeders continued to pour through Skagway and up the trail. With only a few short summer months, when the lakes and rivers were not frozen, it became almost impossible to bring goods into the Yukon. One man, Michael James Heaney, believed that there was a better way of getting goods over the pass rather than taking the wagon road. After witnessing $800,000 of Klondike gold in Seattle on July 17, 1897, Heaney bought a ticket to Alaska. Heaney was a Canadian railway contractor. His early fascination of railroads, building, and design didn't shy him away from the challenge of dreaming up a railroad that went over the mountain pass. Construction would have its challenges, but was feasible. Give me enough dynamite and snooze and I'll build you a railroad to hell. A chance encounter at the St. James Hotel in Skagway led Heaney to meet Erastus C. Hawkins from Seattle and British engineer Sir Thomas Tancred. These 2 men were representing a group of British financiers, the Close brothers, who wanted to finance the endeavor. Construction of the narrow-gauge White Pass Yukon Route railroad began on May 27, 1898, down the center of Broadway and Skagway. George Brackett knew all too well the hardships of building a road through the steep mountain climbs and zigzagging rivers. He was relieved to sell his toll road to the train. Extreme weather conditions on the pass posed challenges for construction. Shipping material from Seattle to Skagway could be difficult. The challenge of coordinating a railroad across international boundaries was no easy task. The men knew that stampeders were not patient and wanted to finish the railway as soon as possible. The railroad was looking for men of all capabilities to work on the line. Gold seekers did not make the most reliable workers. High labor turnover rates estimate that 35,000 people worked on the railroad in the 2-year span of construction. There were 2,700 people working at any given time, and it cost $100,000 per mile to construct. Thousands of people worked together to finish the 110-mile track all the way to Whitehorse, Yukon Territory of Canada. It's now an international historic civil engineering landmark, alongside the Eiffel Tower and the Panama Canal. After facing many challenges to get the job done, a group of dedicated people finished the railway in 2 years, 2 months, and 2 days on July 29, 1900. This was the death knell to Dyea, which had begun as a Tlingit trading post and swelled to 5,000 people by 1899. After about an hour and a half on the train, we reached the White Pass summit, 2,865 feet above sea level and 15 miles from Skagway. However, for the stampeders, reaching this summit was just the beginning. They still faced a grueling journey to Lake Bennett, where they built or bought boats to float down the Yukon River to the Klondike goldfields near Dawson City. While on the railroad, you can see the original Klondike Trail of 1898 worn into the rocks, a permanent tribute to the thousands of souls who passed this way in search of fortune. The Klondike Gold Rush lasted only a few years, but it left an incredible mark on this landscape and on history. Gold mining still continues today in both Alaska and the Yukon, using modern methods that would astound those early prospectors. Klondike Trail tested the limits of human endurance and ingenuity. It's a testament to what humans are capable of when driven by powerful motivators, such as that as the promise of gold. If you'd like to see what modern-day gold mining is like in the Yukon, let us know in the comments and we'll try and make it happen. Should we continue this journey where it all began? And if you've enjoyed this journey through history, don't forget to like this video and subscribe. We've got plenty more stories written in stone coming your way, from ancient geological wonders to human histories etched in the landscape. We're here to uncover the tales that rocks can tell. Until next time, keep exploring the world beneath your feet.